All right. Hey, good afternoon or good evening, rather. I guess it really depends on where you're at in the world, but nonetheless, I hope all is well. I'm going to share my screen here. Uh, if you would, anybody that's out there, if you'll let me know if you can hear me and see my screen, that would be cool.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, cool. Awesome. So, welcome to week 12 of Violent Python. As we traverse every week, we are becoming ever so closer to the end of the semester, right? So I commend you all for sticking with it thus far, and we are close to the end, but we still have a couple of things we need to do. So in this week, we'll be talking about the natural language processing as it applies to Python, right? We mentioned we'll talk about that. We'll explore corpus. I'll show you a couple of things about the natural language toolkit. And then we'll really talk about what you have for your assignment this week, which I think you all will certainly enjoy them. All right, so as we talk about this whole language processing aspect, right? It's like, well, what is this? And as we look at Mary D. Harris specifically, her thoughts on this, ever so antiquated, if you will, or a little bit older, but still very relevant today. Natural language is any language that humans learn from. I certainly agree with that, and you probably would agree with it as well. She goes on to say that what humans learn from in their environment and can be used to communicate with others. Whatever the form of communication, natural languages are used to express our knowledge and emotions to convey our responses to other people and to our surroundings. And that's very interesting because even when we talk about something as so minute as where we're from within the part of the world, right? If you're from a more traditional southern United States state in the United States, you may have a certain way that you talk, or if you're more of a New Englander, if you will, from the United States, or just a different part of the world, period. And how we convey things are certainly different based upon that, but we do it in such a way where certainly other people can understand what we're trying to say. So that brings us to, well, how do we judge the effectiveness? And we have another quote here, right? Based upon the effectiveness of essentially the natural language system that attempts to interpret, understand, and respond accordingly. This falls into the Turing test, right? Named after Alan Turing. Now, this was based upon his paper from the 1950s. Now, what's interesting is when you think 1950s, you don't maybe think that they are thinking about computing machinery and intelligence, but certainly they were. They continue to even to this day, as we see ourselves here in 2022 utilizing this in such a high capacity, if you will. It may not look as such, but we certainly are. And really, his question is, can machines think? And that's very interesting because one may argue, yes, they can think because I'm training them to think. And somebody else may argue, well, if I program them to think, they can have a limited form of a communication, almost like when you're calling maybe your cell phone provider or your cable provider, and you get that bot, if you will, who's trying to have a conversation with you. They're trying to process things in such a natural language perspective, and then they're trying to make decisions based upon their interpretation of what you're trying to say. You may be like me and just say customer service just to skip that. But nonetheless, we can certainly agree that it's standing the test of time. And our very own Professor Hosmer, he goes on to essentially talk about since the internet really didn't materialize until something recognizable until roughly the 1980s, this concept of expressing emotion and knowledge digitally wasn't something that we were accustomed to, right? As we think about it from the perspective of social media today, right? Or even just email. However, these are certainly, an aspect of being able to provide natural language expression. And from his perspective, extracting meaning semantics from natural language is quite a bit more difficult than it looks. And I'd agree with that, right? Because it's all about trying to make it natural, but also make it usable. And sometimes the two are not necessarily mutually exclusive. So that brings me to really setting the stage here with what's a corpus. And as we get into the natural language, a corpus is nothing more than a natural language text that is typically a collection of written text that focus on a specific topic, event, author, or genre. Okay, so that's key because the type of text that we'll be going through, or you're going to be asked to go through, I'll refer to them or refer to that data set as a corpus, and now you kind of have a good understanding, if you will, at a high level of what that is. Now, if you take away nothing else from tonight's lecture, this is the slide that you want to certainly bookmark, put a star next to, or just certainly take note about it. So within the VLE, the NLTK is already installed. What you're going to have to do, though, is when you open up Wing IDE, go to the shell, all right, the tab, the Python shell, and type those commands that are there. What you're going to have is this pop-up that appears. You're then going to press the download button, and then you're going to walk away for 10 minutes or so. This is going to update the library and everything associated with it. And you're going to want to do this, I recommend, each time before you get ready to use the NLTK within the environment. If not, you could find yourself running into big issues, right? Issues that could literally be solved if we just take a minute or so to do this. Now, once you do this, like if you do it right now, you'll be good to go for a day or so, or whatever the case. But it updates so rapidly that you would not go wrong by just updating it, once a day if you're going to be on here working on an assignment and that frequency. Again, this is huge. You're going to want to follow this so that way you don't run into issues. All right, so the natural language toolkit. And actually, let's just walk through this.
And I'm assuming we'd have problems if we try to do it like on our host machine.
So you may or may not have problems on your host machine. The thing about the VLE, though, is we've set it up in such a way that if you have issues, they are issues that should exist with every machine because it's a copy of a copy. When we start getting into people's personal machines, it makes it a little bit more difficult to troubleshoot because we don't necessarily know that environment. However,
Gotcha.
yes, you could download the NLTK and follow those same directions on your personal machine. Okay, so I'm going to walk through the use of this. You'll see just how I don't want to say simple, but how fluent it flows. So I'll go ahead and stop my debugger. I'm going to go ahead and step into this. And right off the bat, we're going to be importing some items from NLTK. That may take a hot second because it's pretty large, but we're going to be doing the essentially a tagger, and then we're going to be doing a tokenizer so we can tokenize specific data. That being said, as you know, I like pretty table. We're going to import pretty table, and then we're going to create an object pretty table with a column of word and part of speech. I'm then going to have a sentence. I will get voting rights to be a reality for everyone. And then we're going to feed that sentence to word tokenizer. Word tokenizer, as you recall from line 6, is what we were having imported in from NLTK. Now, when we look at this, it's going to tokenize that, and it looks sort of like a list. However, there's a couple of other things that are being done in the background for us that really sets us up to be able to tag those items. And what I mean by tagging them, well, it's going to take the English language and be able to depict what each one of those items are for us. So for example, when we see, come on, when we see I, PRP is essentially a pronoun. We have, let's see what else is in here. So at the end, everyone, right? Like each one of those has some form of meaning. Nonetheless, rather than looking at it from that perspective, I'm going to loop through each one of those tags and then feed it to my table. We're going to spit that out, and I'm not going to wait on it. So I have a breakpoint here. And then once we're done, we're going to spit that out. We're going to spit out that whole table for us. So that way we are good to go. Now, you may be looking at that and be like, okay, well, that's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. I take my string, I feed it to word tokenizer, I then feed it to POS_tag, I then loop through it, spitting that information out. Yes. Now, these are two things that are part of NLTK, and NLTK is large as far as its capability. Now, I'm going to show you something else, and this is what I'm going to, actually you have access to on D2L. And this starts to set the stage for what are you doing this week? Well, you're going to be utilizing this example code I have, and then you're going to be adding some more to it. So we're going to be utilizing a couple of other things that we can do for within NLK as well. And with that, what we're going to be feeding it is essentially a corpus of the O.J. Simpson trial. So we have essentially the transcripts associated with them. This information is for you, or set for you already in D2L for you to be able to download it. So I'm going to go ahead and run this just so you can kind of see how it works. All right, so first things first, it's going to ask me for a path. I have my corpus file right there at the root of C. So I fed that folder. It picked up the 4 corpus text files in there. It's reading it in, and now I have an option menu, if you will. And you can kind of see from my code around line 91, that's where my menu starts. So if I wanted to print out the length of the full corpus, well, I can put in 1, and it's thinking, it's giving me that information back. Once it's done, I get the press enter to continue, which then feeds me that menu again. Okay, well, that's pretty cool. Well, what about getting the number of tokens found? Well, I can press 2, it gets me that information, and then it returns. So I can press enter and be good. Well, what about the vocabulary size? Same thing. However, what we'll notice here is we didn't actually get anything back. Well, what about number 4? We want to search for word occurrence. Let's say I do run. Okay, well, guess what? We're not going to get anything back there either. Why? Because you may have already started to guess that is going to be your assignment this week. You're going to take this code and you're going to essentially add on to it. So you'll see a number of places where, and they're all concurrent or linear rather, where it says your code here. So you're going to finish this function for vocab size, collocation. You might go like collocation. Yeah. So this assignment is going to require you to research what that actually means and how do I use that within the NLTK. Word occurrence, concordance, you're going to do similarities, and then you have another aspect of vocabulary. So you're going to fill that in. So then the full intent would be that these options then actually work, right? Because right now they don't actually provide anything back. And the test file that you'll be using, and what I'll be using when I do my validation of it, is going to be that O.J. Simpson transcript. Now, as you're trying to get this going, I think a good, easy test for you would be once you start NLTK and you update it, is just to run through rather the example simple word POS tagger PY script, because that was very straightforward, where we're importing in essentially our string, or we're declaring our string, tokenizing it, tagging it, and then spitting it back out. So you might want to use that as a validation to make sure that your NLTK library is working and there's no issues before trying to go into the example and adding to it. But that is
Well,
all you have for this week. Sorry, go ahead. You about to say
yeah,
something?
I guess, could you explain that last part again? I'm not sure how that connects to each other. The simple word to the NLTK.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So as you jump into the VLE, one of the first things that I recommended that you do was to go ahead and update your NLTK so it can have the latest packages in corpus. A good indication of that it is actually working and you have no issues is to be able to use a very simple script that's going to take advantage of NLTK in corpus. And if it works, then you could almost be like, oh, okay, I'm good to go before you start working on something a little bit more in depth.
Okay, you're based. This is like a test. It's like a test run. Once
That's
if
it.
that can. Okay, I got you.
Yep, good question, and certainly good question for good clarification. So our lecture this week is very short. We had the papers from last week. I'm going through them now. I looked at a couple of them. Awesome, very thought-provoking. This week, we're going to be messing with the Python natural language library, right? So you can kind of get a feel for that. And then you have a little bit of research that you have to do to be able to fill in the remaining items. But everything you need, the example script, the simple word POS tagger, the corpus, those items are on D2L for you. And then the assignment itself spells out explicitly the items that you'll fill in, but I just kind of pointed them out from the example script. So, you know, as you fill those items in, you don't have to worry about building a menu. That's already done in there, right? As you fill them in and somebody presses selects option 6 for generate similarities, that ultimately is going to call this function, and you'll be filling in the rest of that code. And it will either work or it does not work. Same thing with print vocabulary. Somebody would be able to press option 7. It's ultimately going to get to this function, and then it's going to execute that block of code. So that being said, I'll pause here. Let's see if we have any questions or anything regarding this week's assignment. Okay, well, nothing heard. So as I get ready to post this on D2L, I'll say it here. You'll also see it in the comment. Next Thursday, we will not have a lecture. Instead, I would do it next Wednesday. So, or we'll just be doing it a day earlier. Have no fear though, if for some reason you're not able to make it, it too, like all the other ones, will be recorded and be added to D2L for you. So again, we'll do it next Wednesday, not next Thursday. The link will be the same, and I'll post that in the announcements so so you have that information. That being said, appreciate everybody joining in tonight. Look forward to seeing your projects, continuously interacting with you within this course. So thanks, everyone.